Well, I want to say how y'all doing tonight. This is James again. Tonight, I thought I'd go back in time a little bit. Instead of making a vlog about traveling or seeing something here in Kentucky, I'd take you on a little journey back in time with me. And to go back in this journey, we'll need a few things. There's a few things I want to talk about. One thing, say right off, you may have noticed in a lot of these videos I'm wearing what's called overalls. Well, that's about all I wear nowadays. And there's a reason to it now. It's comfortable, and it's just what I've chose. I like the feel of them. But going back years ago, I had a great uncle. His name was Floyd. And Floyd was on my mother's side, her mother's brother. And his name was Floyd, as I said a minute ago. And he wore bibbed overalls all the time. And I once, long ago, asked my mama, now why'd Floyd wear overalls all the time? And she told me that's pretty much all he ever wore. He'd get him a pair of new overalls. He'd wear them till he'd wear them plumb out. Years ago, they'd wear them till they got holes in them, and their knees get out or get the seat out or something. They'd take some old fabric from somewhere else and sew it back in them and keep going. Then I got thinking about something else, and I was looking for something to kind of use as a prop for what I was going to talk about in this video, but I discovered that you can't find it, and if you do find it, you're going to pay through the nose through it. Back when I was a young child, I remember one of the things I thought was so neat was going over to the store next door to my house where my dad would hang out at times, and some men would sit around, and they just sit around and talk. They wouldn't really, they might talk about politics, they might talk about the weather, just talk about whatever on a day when they didn't have to be nowhere special. And they'd sit on an old milk crate, or not milk crate, but a pop crate or soda crate or Coke crate, whatever you want to call it. Years ago, they'd come in a wooden thing, 24 bottles of either Pepsi, Coca-Cola, whatever brand it was, be in that crate. And the crates, of course, as the bottles got sold, 12, 6-pack here, 6-pack there, 8-pack, whatever it happened to be. I think it was 8-packs back then. Well, people carry the 8-pack off, and then wooden crates would stack up and go back to the Coca-Cola plant or back to the Pepsi plant, be refilled with more 6 or 8-packs of soda and come back again. Kind of like the cardboard pallet you get with them in it today, only back years ago it was made of wood. Well, those old gentlemen would take and set one of them up on the end, and they'd sit on it, kind of like I'm sitting on this little stool thing today. And they'd just sit around and, as you might say here in Kentucky, chew the fat. And you'd see many things going on there, like, good example, it's an old Case XX knife. And this was either my father's or grandfather's. I couldn't tell you which. I'm going to guess my dad's. He might have got it from my granddad. But this is, of course, an antique knife now, because my dad died years and years ago. And so this knife was probably made in the 60s or 50s. And one of the things they do, they'd sit around times and whittle. And it wasn't necessarily just to make something. It might have been just what I'm doing here, just skinning bark off an old tree limb or scraping an old piece of wood. Sometimes it'd be to make something. Like, I remember Floyd, the great uncle I was telling you all about a few minutes ago. He come one time down here to the house, and he had something that just intrigued me. And all it was a kind of a stick, about the same length, a little bit shorter than what I got right in my hand there. And it was a special type stick. And when I say special, I mean it was off a certain type of plant. And the way those were made is they had a hollow center down them. And he'd sit and he'd whittle the ends of it off. He took it probably just like what you see me doing here. Taking his thumb, holding it and chipping a little off, little off, little off, little off. And when he got done, he had both ends of it rounded on each end. And he made the most simple thing, but me being probably about 6, 7 years old. It fascinated me. What he'd done is he took that piece of stick that had a hollow center. He'd found a straight one, and he'd rounded it off on both ends. And he'd plucked a piece of straw, just old grass straw, out of the field, some dried stuff. And he cut that straw about an inch, inch and a half longer than the stick he'd made. And his stick's only about that long, about 3 inches long maybe. And he'd cut that straw probably around 4 inches long. And he put the straw in it, and he'd just push it on one end, it'd pop out the other end. He'd sit there and hold it and push it back through. The simplest thing you ever seen, but I guess in a way you could describe my fascination as a child with that as something like when people make those cup and ball toys where you got a cup on a stick, and you got a ball on a string, and you got to swing it up and try to catch it. You know, an old toy from years ago, wooden ball that just fits in that cup, and the whole objective is get in there. Well, and this one's even simpler because all you were doing is pushing that straw through that stick back and forth, back and forth. And the red bandana, you might say, yeah, it's a prop, sort of, for this. It's actually one I use and use for like a handkerchief, but brought it out so I could mention it. I remember many older gentlemen carrying them shoved in their hip pockets on their overalls, or a lot of gentlemen back then wore dress style pants with suspenders and a button-up shirt, and it wasn't dress pants. They were old pants, but they'd originally started out as dress pants. And you look at back in old pictures, if you get some from years ago, you'll see that. You see the overalls. The overalls was a farm and working man's clothes. Something he'd wear out, take care of the hogs, take care of the chickens, take care of his cow if he had one, milk the cow, work out in the fields, getting the tobacco in. That there's a job. I never did do the housing of it, but I did a good bit of cutting tobacco. I can tell you from experience, that's some hard work. Men back then that worked in the fields all day, they earned every penny they got. Thinking about that, I remember hearing my mother tell me about my grandfather. He'd work sometimes, he'd go off in the morning when he had all his work at home caught up, and he'd work for somebody else. When he was working for them, well, he'd work for an entire day. At the end of the day, he'd get a quarter. Now, you might be saying that had to be years ago. Well, you'd be right. Probably the time frame that was happening was probably, I'm going to guess, in the late 30s, mid 30s, late 30s, maybe early 40s. Maybe right before World War II. But kind of the theme of what I want to talk to y'all about tonight is like that little toy I told you about. Wasn't nothing but a straw being pushed through a stick. Men just sitting around in front of the old gas station, sitting on soda crates or pop crates or Coke crates, whatever you want to call them, and just, as I said, chewing the fat, just talking. Not in no hurry to go nowhere, no hurry to do nothing. But if you look at it, it kind of makes you wonder. Seems like today we're always in a hurry to get somewhere, always in a hurry to get something done. How many times do you just sit when you ain't watching no TV and you ain't out running after something or watching videos on the internet or playing on the internet, and you just relax and see what's going on around you, talking to somebody nearby, maybe a neighbor, maybe somebody down at the place. I don't see people gathering around as much as they used to years ago. They still do some, gas stations and different places, maybe sit and talk a little bit, or stand around the counter and talk a little bit. But it seems like that leisurely time of the men getting together and sitting around doing that is just a thing of days gone by. The other thing that I was thinking about when I was talking about days gone by, I was thinking about the women too. Women also had things that they did at times. I remember had a garden out in the field. We'd plant green beans, all sorts of vegetables. And I remember when it come harvest time to bring all that in, of course they was way more than we could eat. And I remember my dad got a freezer, thought that was the greatest thing because all you had to do is put the vegetables in a bag and tie it up with a wire tie, put it in the freezer and freeze it. But you know, them vegetables would be alright, and they'd be frozen solid and all, and they might be full of all the nutritional value and all, but they never did taste as good as some of my grandmother sit right here in this yard beside me, and she'd snap them green beans. She'd tear the strings off. She called them string beans. She'd pull that string off, throw it away and string them, then snap them, maybe call them snap beans or string beans. And she'd snap them off in pieces, about an inch long, maybe an inch and a half sometimes 3/4 inch. You know, there wasn't no formula to it. They wasn't cut exact like they are in the factories possibly today. And then she'd commence doing what they called canning. She'd wash them green beans, get them good and clean, and then she had her formula of how much salt to put them in water and mix it up and put it in the mason jars. And I say mason jar, you know, most people call a jar mason jar, whether it's a ball jar, whether it's a mason jar, because Mason was one of the brand names them jars come in. You'd have the rings and you'd have the separate lid. And she'd have a big old cooker sitting on the stove. Old gas stove made back in the 50s or so. It's sitting there on the stove with the burner running that water heating up to boil. She'd sit them jars down in there. They'd heat up. When the water was boiling them around them, she knew they'd been hot enough. She'd let them boil for a certain length of time, and I couldn't tell you what it is. If you're interested in canning itself, you can probably look that up on the internet nowadays. After she got done boiling them for a while, she'd stop it, and then she'd use like a set of tongs or something, or a rag to reach in there, pull them out and set them out on the counter. And as them jars cooled down, you'd hear them. They'd be sitting there on the counter, another set boiling, and every now and then you'd hear a tink, tink, tink. And what that was that jar lid sealing and popping down. As it cooled on the inside, well, it would create a vacuum seal. And the same thing as canned goods you buy today, they're canned sealed. When you first pop into one of them, you hear that little suction sound going away. That's where they got sealed from being cooked inside them cans. And the same thing back then happened. And am I saying just women sitting there? Oh, no, I'm not. I can remember many times my dad would be out there in the field collecting it and harvesting it, bringing it up here, my grandmother, mother, me sitting around and getting that stuff ready to can. And I remember they canned tomatoes, they canned tomato juice, green beans, peas, you name it, any kind of vegetable you can imagine. Got to put in them canning jars, boiled away a little bit to heat them up, cook them somewhat, and they'd keep for years like that. Now I'm waiting that truck gets by, make it easier to hear me. Seems like a muffler's a hard thing to come by sometimes today. But it just appears to me that we're in such a hurry to do things nowadays, and we're rushing about everything we do. Kind of makes you wonder, are we better off today with maybe more cash and able to buy things? Or were we better off years ago when you worked for everything you had, but you also had a little bit more leisure time to sit back and relax and enjoy? Mention that, I kind of remember another thing that happened, and I guess this will be the last of my stories for tonight. I remember being down at an uncle's house of mine. He had a farm, raised tobacco, raised corn, had cattle, different things. And as a part of that, he had need of water to provide for the cattle and all. So he decided he was going to have him a pond, and they hired some fella to come out there with a bulldozer and bulldoze the ground up. And if you're not familiar with Kentucky at all, there's little ridges, draws, and there's spurs and stuff all over the place. So all you got to do is find a little bit of a draw in between two hilly parts of land where it's a little lower in the middle, and you just got to push the dirt up at one end, and you've created a dam that'll hold water. Well, that's what they's doing. Of course, it wasn't just me down there at his house watching that. There was a whole bunch of us down there. And my wife, She'd not ever seen nothing like that. She just thought it was fascinating and had a good laugh at our expense. Later, she couldn't believe it. We was all sitting around watching people building a dam with a bulldozer. And she thought it was kind of, I guess maybe it was silly even in her eyes, but with us it was something that was necessary and needed. And of course my uncle was watching it be done to make sure it was done suit him, and the rest of us just watching because, again, simple time. Didn't have no real place to be, no place had to go, and sit around doing that. So either way, that's just kind of a little touch from me on some of the things I remember from years back. And I was thinking it would be something good to talk about. Maybe get somebody to thinking. Maybe get some of y'all that might happen to see this YouTube video to ponder what's went on in the past and what's in our future. And that sometimes it might be a good idea to just stop, sit down, chew the fat a little bit and relax. Y'all have a good night. I'll see you again soon. Or as I used to say when I was young, y'all come back now, you hear?